So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a few moments now for Stefan to answer just three questions, which are kind of like clusters of questions that really kind of came up. And I suppose the first one was really to do with the tension between the institution and the fringe, and perhaps the whole thing of how can we relate well to one another? How do we actually kind of cultivate the ability to be able to give permission and encouragement, and at the same time own the if you like the piece of work that is actually happening on the edge. And so really great, Stefan, if you could just spend a bit of time helping us to kind of think through how we relate these two things together. How do we deal with the tension between the institution and the fringe?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is a pretty complicated question. But first I would say, you need to, if you have the problem, then at least you have something. I mean, there are bad problems and good problems. The good problems usually happen because at least something happens. And then something begins to, the balance of the system begins to be disturbed somehow, and that of course creates all kind of tensions. But so my simplest answer would be, you have to work it out simply on the job while doing it. You have to find all kinds of solutions that work for a while, appoint people that can connect other people, and so forth and so on. So what I can tell from my experience in the Netherlands is what I see that churches have often done is at least set up a sort of office where people with experience in pioneering and church planting are supervising it. You need people who are in between. The point I already said about do not connect the pioneers too closely with the center. Not because the center is bad or the pioneers are bad, but simply because usually these people cannot get along with each other too well. They're too different. So you need those people in between. And the Protestant Church in the Netherlands, for example, has also appointed a number of, how would you translate that? Pioneer coaches, at least well-trained theologians with some pioneer experience. So usually people who have planted a church for themselves already, who were involved in a church planting, and who are appointed by the church to supervise several projects at the same time. Also to point out what's new there, to install training, feedback loops, and so to see how the knowledge that's been discovered there can get back to the center. So there is no single recipe. Every church is different, but you need those kind of people. That's very important. And then, like I said, you need a lot of trust. So and trust is a nice word, but you can have some rationality behind the trust you give if you have good training. You should really invest in people. If you find it important that pioneering is being done, then try to find the people who can do it, and I can say a bit more about that in due time, and then invest in them, really train them, help them to get the job done. That's important. So you cannot blueprint these things in advance. You need to work solutions out on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Number of questions around the areas of selecting pioneers, recruiting them, selecting them, and training them. Can you maybe start with selection and recruitment? How can what have you done that would help us to think about selection and recruitment of pioneers first of all?
Yeah, well, the main problem with pioneering is obviously that there are not enough pioneers. When it's becoming a bit of a thing, that's what I find in the Netherlands, then lots of people are interested in it, and there are even a lot of people who think they're called to do it, but not everyone who thinks he or she can do it is able to do it. So the first thing I think is important is for churches to think a bit wider than just their own crowd. Especially the large mainline churches often find it difficult to find the pioneers because most of the pioneers are working in the free churches, independent churches, churches that are, let's say, Baptists and so on. So what the large Protestant church in the Netherlands has done, they have appointed several people from these free churches in their own offices. Simple. Help us. Think with us. We pay you for that. We want to pick your brain and learn from your experiences. So that's one thing you can do. The second is many of the people you need are not found in, as far as I know, in the seminaries or in the academic training. I do a lot of academic training myself. I'm a professor, so I love it. I love theology. But most of my students, at least, well, sometimes I say, it's a bit of a dangerous thing to say, but as soon as someone is capable of sitting 6 years in academic training, he or she is probably very unfit for pioneering. Our quite monocultural idea of training, 6 years in academy, which is a very reformed thing and which is very good, because people need to learn Hebrew and Greek and so on, and that takes years and years and years to do all these things well, is not very helpful when you are looking for entrepreneurs. I've seen sometimes that you take people from the street, train them for 6 years, and then they don't know anymore how to do it. So preferably, I would say, try to design training modules that are brief, some initial training, maybe some more extensive initial training for 1 year or 2 years, and then send them out, but let them come back every year. Make it lifelong learning. So we need to say goodbye to the models of theological training that assume that you can learn everything you need to learn, including reading Karl Barth and whatever, which actually you should learn, which you should read not before you're 50, I think. But anyway, that you can learn all those things in 6 years when you're between 18 and 25, and then just go for it. That's not what a serious profession is. So I would say let them come back every year and let them get more training. What we also do is internships. We do a lot of internships. So people who are interested in church planting, we invite them to do an internship with a church plant under the supervision of an experienced church planter. These people can be theological students, usually undergraduates, and we just ask them to work with a church plant for a year or 2 years. For a church plant, it's a good thing to have because you always have a limitation of hands on a job. So if you have a good, well-trained person who's willing to work with you for 1 or 2 years, is always welcome. Not brief internships, because that's not a church planter doesn't like that, because you need to invest a lot of time in someone, and he or she cannot give much back. So long internships. Assessments. So what we do is once or twice a year, we have an assessment based on research into competencies that people need to do this kind of stuff. So we have about 30 or so competencies. Of course, there's no single person who has every competency that you need, but that's the reason why you work together in teams. So what we do is, if someone is interested in church planting, we say, well, within 2 months we have an assessment day, or a day, and in that day people are invited to, in a room like this. They do several assignments, they have a disc test, there's some psychological profiling test, a lot of conversation with experienced church planters and theologians. They tell about their calling, their vocation. Sometimes they do a brief sermon presentation or something like that. And usually, as far as I can see, when 6 experienced people, the assessors, look at you for 1 day, almost inevitably, they know if you are a church planter or not. It's not, it's not rocket science. Mostly, some exceptions there are, of course, but mostly, when experienced people look at someone for an extensive period of time, let's say a full day in all kinds of assignments, you know more or less whether this is a person who has it in him or her. So these are several things we do.
Thank you. And again, quite a number of questions around the idea of incubators. So creating space for people and helping them to, and then investing in those folks. Can you again, just can you flesh that out? Tell us a bit more about how that's happened and what sorts of things would have, are the stepping stones to getting us to being able to have that kind of thing within the Scottish context. So the incubators type of idea.
Thank you. I don't know anything about the Scottish context, so I'm just saying what I've learned from my own experience in the Netherlands. This is a very new thing, the renewal or innovation thing. So it's only just taking off. So the experiences are very, very recent. So there's not much to say yet. But what I can see is, in terms of distance from the center, which is basically, that's simply a historical observation. I shouldn't exaggerate, but it would surprise me if more than 5 or 10% of all the real innovations in church had come from the center of power. I'm not saying that nothing comes from there, or that nothing good comes from there, because it's not that there are no good things except for innovations. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, you need the center, absolutely. You need the stability. But I'm just saying that the innovations, the new kinds of thinking, ideas, practices, are almost always coming from the margins. So, allowing it to happen. That's basically the thing. And we talked about it for a while. And then about the new questions coming up, the incubator thing, different people to each other. I would say lots of it depends on local leadership, on the person of the church planter. Is he or she a person who can allow that to happen? Some people find it very difficult to work with very different people, or to cope with very different ideas or theologies. And obviously you need some shared values and purposes, but and I would not say that every church plant should be like that, but I know one or two very good examples from Amsterdam. For example, one friend of mine who is a theater producer and a theologian, he has made it, that's maybe, it's a bit far-fetched for some of you, but he has planted a church for atheists and Christians. There are atheists in his church, and they make theater productions together. Theater productions about issues of life, and he is the one who said, as a Christian, I always put something of the gospel in it. So they make all kinds of productions. They're very cutting edge. They get attention from all kinds of secular newspapers and so on. So I mean, it's not amateurish. It's very good, very professional what they're doing. It's for a select few because they're artists. It's not just, you need to have something with art. But what the Christians and non-Christians do there together is very interesting and very new insights also in the faith come up. And what he does, for example, is he writes Bible studies based on his experiences in this particular church and sends them out through the internet all over the Netherlands. And it's been read very widely, also in the Bible Belt, because people see that something very interesting is happening here, something that is really touches the core of the gospel, which lands or contextualizes in a very, very deeply secularized environment, because artists in Amsterdam are the most secular people you can think of. I wouldn't know of anyone more secular than that. They really hate Christianity or religion in general, but something is happening there. So that's not, I'm just mentioning this example because it's a very well-defined example, but also a bit far-fetched, maybe a bit all too creative. But it's an example of things that can happen, and you never know in advance what comes out of it. Some of the things fail. That's all in the game. Maybe 50%, maybe 25% fails. But yeah, if you don't try, you'll never. If you don't want to fail, you shouldn't try. So yeah.